Thank you for that question. You know, so much to say, so little time. You know, you start rectifying it by raising education and awareness. As I came into office, Jennifer Ruggles was just leaving office, and I had, prior to taking the oath, I was nervous about taking the oath as well. And I had a good friend and mentor that was like, hey, I know somebody, and she introduced me to Dr. Sai, and we had many conversations, and he wanted me at first to kind of follow in Jennifer Ruggles' footsteps, and I was like, well, I'm not sure about that, because I felt bad for other people that got me to the point where we're just taking office. And we were thinking about it, and we had many discussions and conversations, and one of my inner circle was like, nobody's gonna know why you're doing it, or if you go down that path. And so we talked about it some more, and we decided to have the presentation, just to, because nobody really knows all that history unless you are in college nowadays. And it's funny thing, I ran into one of the kid paddlers in our canoe club after or before, and we were talking about it. He was in college by that time, and he's all like, I never even knew any of that stuff. I had to go to college to learn it, and like now I'm 20. I'm like, I'm 40. It took me, like, be glad you learned it at 20, So I think, the first step is to raise education and awareness. And from there, keep it in mind. And my background in community advocacy comes from the Save Honolua Coalition, like where we got together and we decided that Honolua was so important that we were going to do everything that we could to save it, whether it's write to politicians, show up at hearings, show up at the state, show up at the county, go to other nonprofits, go to businesses and whatnot, and get the support that we needed. And it's the same thing for this occupation that we're in. Every single avenue that you can, every single opportunity that you can, you just raise awareness, because that's part of the laws that we're boxed into. That's why we're facing the problems that we're facing today, because we're having a continental mentality and a westernized laws being put upon us and direct our thinking that we can't solve the problems ourselves, that we're so dependent on this other system. From the time I was young, I felt or knew that America and Hawaii wasn't the right thing. And I remember people telling me like, oh, well, and this is before McDonald's was a bad thing or whatever. They're like, well, if you want to go back to the kingdom, then you can't ever eat at McDonald's because, Hawaii never had McDonald's, or only America has McDonald's. And I was like, well, I mean, McDonald's is great, but whatever. And then one time later in life, I went to Japan, and I'm like, hey, they got McDonald's. They're not America. It's like that kind of fear mindset of things that they tell you it can't be done, but it's only because they're not doing it. And one of my husband's cousins told us something, and I, some people say, if all those different groups, if all Hawaiians got on the same page, then we could reclaim Hawaii and regain our sovereignty. And that's true. It would be so much easier if everybody like got on the same page and worked together towards it. But my husband's cousin, Kapali Keahi, he said, that's BS, because where else in the world do you see any person all on the same page? America has libertarians, Republicans, Democrats, every other country in the world has opposing viewpoints within their people, and they're allowed to be their own country, and I don't think it's the different ideas or the different avenues that we take that makes us weaker. It really makes us stronger, although it might take us a little longer to get there. maybe the things that was planning before we settled on the idea of having him give a presentation were much more radical, that they thought it was a good idea that I just have a presentation. Like I forget the exact details, but I was planning on sending some letters to some different agencies and doing other things, and all of this was going on in my head when I was like, well, nobody knows all these things that are going on in my head. And it's like, rewind, start at the beginning. What's going on? What's the problem? Like, why was I even scared to take the oath of office? The oath of office says to uphold the United States Constitution, which says that there shall be no annexation without a treaty, and so it's all legit stuff as Dr. Sai breaks it down. And as we're assigned our committees, we have jurisdiction of our own committee to designate who is a resource person. And you just put it on your agenda. I'm going to have Dr. Keanu Sai give a presentation about the legal status of America of Hawaii under international law. So then when you have the person show up, whoever it is that you designate as the resource person, you say, I'd like to designate this person as a resource based on whatever his criteria and qualifications are. And then you ask your committee any objections, and then they say no objections. And, different committees have had different resource people come in, and as long as they're a legit credentialed person, I don't see a reason why they wouldn't be allowed.